I'm Jake Aaron Villarreal, born and raised in Silicon Valley, and here to take you behind the scenes to share what it's like to be a startup founder, the journey they're on, the problems they face, the products they build in an effort to transform industries. I'm excited to have with us today Christina Lopes, the co-founder and CEO of FidoCure. Christina, welcome to the show.
Jake, it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you here. It's oftentimes we're focused on companies that are building technologies that help in industries and manufacturing and different components of AI. But what you're building has a human and a pet feel to it. And we'll walk into exactly what it is you're building. For the listeners, a little background on Christina. She's not only the co founder, but leads the company, which is a platform leveraging AI to personalize cancer treatments and develop drugs for dogs. A World Economic Forum Young Global Leader and Inc. magazine top 100 female founder, Christina has expanded FidoCure to over 1,350 clinics globally, treating 5,500 dogs and more. Christina, great background. Can't wait to get into your story here. Where are you joining us from today?
I'm in Palo Alto, actually, so joining you from the heart of Silicon Valley.
Hundreds of AI startups are launching every month, battling to build their founding teams. As a leader, your job is to get results. When it comes to hiring, that's where it gets tough. So you go out and you try a recruitment firm, but they don't understand your story. They're off target, and when they send you candidates, it's a waste of time. We believe you should never have your time wasted. That's why we launched Match Relevant, because your story is more than just an open role. It's your founder's journey, the problem you're solving, the product you're building, and why it matters. When we work with companies, we make sure we understand your whole story. So when we go out and do a search, we're on target. It's worth their time. They're interested. And more importantly, it's worth yours. And when it comes to hiring engineers, we work to make sure we get it right by deploying a team of seasoned CTOs that have built some of Silicon Valley's best companies. They can collaborate with you in the technical interviewing process. They can be a sounding board, or they can run it for you. When it comes to building teams, there's no time to waste. Let's make it count. If you have a role that needs to be filled, book a time with a hiring guide at matchrelevant.com and learn how we do it. I love it. I'm from there, which is why we have the title of the podcast, and excited to have you join. Where were you from originally?
So, unlike you, though, I'm not born in Silicon Valley. I'm adopted, call it. I was born actually in Brazil, so quite a ways away in a very remote town. In the mountains of Rio, but in the middle of really nowhere. So yeah, I've lived also in the East Coast of the United States, but I'm not from around here.
Gotcha. Well, welcome to the West Coast. I know you've been here for some time. Give us a little background of your origin story. How did you get into technology, into the space that you're focused on today, and just in general, walk us through your background. Were you the little girl that had the lemonade stand on the corner growing up? Were you always looking at building opportunities for yourself? Walk us through your background.
So that's a great way to frame it. So I was in Brazil growing up, and Brazil had actually become financially a failed state. So there was hyperinflation, everyday prices changed. There was a lot of economic instability. There was the first democratic elections. The president like died the next day. So it was just a really tumultuous time. And so I actually immigrated to the US just with my mother and to Massachusetts. And we were literally the poorest people in my whole town. It was like a town known for the like soccer mom. Like we didn't have a car. So it was pretty drastic. There was obviously much more of a stable environment for sure, but already coming and being an immigrant very early on already gives you huge, how do you call it, like vantage point, right? And my mom was actually Irish. So my parents met in the MIT ecosystem in the 60s. My dad from Brazil, my mom from Ireland. So even in Brazil, I had already been quite different, mom with red hair. So kind of the origin story is I always had a perspective that maybe was not the status quo. So if you think about conventional thinking needs to conventional everything, I definitely was not conventional from the start. My dad was a quantum physicist. He had abilities to explain things in, the Einstein, like from the point of view of a very, very theoretical physics. He left notes for me to clean up Barbie dolls and computer code. So it was a very unusual kind of upbringing. Um, so that all gave me this concept of not being housed, right? So if you're very, settled in one place, you kind of think the world is this way, you might not have an idea of a possibility. But when you've seen different ways, different values, and I traveled a lot, different things are possible. And then you layer on that my dad was quite intellectually, the life of the mind was very alive. Coupled with, the real struggle, the real economic struggles in Brazil, but then as an immigrant. So all of that kind of fueled a passion for building, for creating something better, but always that mission that it can't be this way, like it must be better. And I don't know if I would have had that conviction if I hadn't seen different worlds, different countries, different cultures do things in different ways. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I like that word conviction because we hear that a lot when we talk to founders about the companies they're building, but it's also from the upbringing that they have. And if you have conviction, oftentimes you find a way to get things done. And you also find a way to lead where people will follow because they believe in your conviction of a product or a service or a mission that you're on. So that to me is a really good word that you brought up. You're from Brazil, you come to the US, you've got into building the company you have today, which is, AI and technology and data. What was the path to getting you on that trajectory of building what you have today, but also, the startup world? What is this your first startup, or do you have experiences
I
leading
am
up
a
to this?
first time founder. No, I am a first time founder. So I'll back up a little bit. So my first kind of like, let's say, foray into career was more in emerging markets finance. So that same mission and conviction of we can bring technology, we can bring capital, we can bring people, right? Ideas, and we can actually like be very into improving, right? Like it's the state of the world, the state of people's lives. So I always worked on that side, and coming from a place I had a financial issue, I was very finance minded. What I started to learn was I was very intrigued by companies and building companies and kind of that whole aura. And I had a streak in me that was this thing that was more entrepreneurial, just in terms of energy and desire, almost like kind of that um, a type of just like a proclivity. I had it more than the usual person working in finance. I was in very large funds and had fantastic opportunities, but I would go a next level that wasn't super usual. In that journey, I started to get more and more into healthcare. So I served on the board of Planned Parenthood for the entire Western Hemisphere, 30
Wow.
million health services. Yeah, it was very big. And it was a very, like, it was an unusual opportunity. I was very young and I really took it like with a lot of responsibility. So I started getting very intrigued about healthcare and I started working on deals in the healthcare space because I'd been a generalist. And once you start getting into health, it's like you can't go back. It's amazing. I didn't think pet healthcare yet, though. That was like way out there. But you'll get where I'm going, where I was actually heading Cerberus Capital, a very big private equity fund. I was actually heading it for Brazil and Latin America in Brazil. And my dad sadly got cancer, and I had had pet dogs with cancer. And what struck me, which was very like an unusual, what looked to me very obvious, but is definitely not obvious, was wow, both get metastases, both, like the cancer is bad, but it might be chemo and radiation that kills them. Coming from not oncology and like the establishment, call it in US healthcare, I was a bit shocked, frankly. I was like, this is not a broken market of, why don't why aren't there better drugs? Why don't aren't they getting to the last mile of care? Um, and I'd always worked again in developing countries, right? And so I had seen when there's a lot of resource scarceness, and I'd worked a lot in that. It was shocking to me that such a like well-funded, oncology space would have still such lack of progress, quite frankly. So I thought it was a market failure. At the same time, Joe Biden was actually releasing the cancer moonshot. He was vice president at Davos in the World Economic Forum. Because my dad had cancer, I was like, oh, I'm going to go. I'm going to find who are the best people. So I went and I spoke to him, and actually I spoke to the person who headed the moonshot. And I surfaced this crazy idea of like, if data, they were very focused already on data. This is 2016, I think around 2016, the lack of data and data integrity and data connectivity within healthcare so that you could use longitudinal medical records to glean insights, important insights. And they were already quite into that. So I started to learn, well, if there's a lack of data and there's HIPAA from a tech point of view, which is a friction for you to really understand, right? I was like, well, pet dogs, they don't have HIPAA. They get cancers. The cancers, I think, are similar. I'm not an expert, but now I am an expert, but I was not. And, you know, could there be a world in which we really reimagine animal testing entirely into something where we help pet dogs? Pet dogs could be other species that develop a disease naturally. We learn, but what we're looking for is what works, and then we help humans with that signal. And it was this whole concept of radical reimagination, because traditional animal testing, you take lab animals that are healthy, it's quite nasty. You induce disease. It's like very bad. And you don't even produce good data. It's not predictive. So
Hmm.
I was like, this is a crazy idea. I was surrounded by some veterinary folks that were also kind of guiding me, very close folks. So concurrently at the National Academy of Medicine, there was a special meeting. As things go and weird ideas sometimes converge, there was a top meeting happening about this, like comparing species in oncology. So cross species, leveraging evolution almost. And I went to the meeting, and basically everybody at the meeting is somehow on my team. Like, long story
Wow.
short. So I thought we're gonna make a company. I was very encouraged, and then I got into Y Combinator under Sam Altman, and that's how I went. So basically, it was like boom, 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 and then in Y Combinator, being part of, let's say, a first vintage of folks really thinking biological data sets and what does that mean. But I'll stop there because that was very long-winded, but I hope interesting.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think the fact that sometimes you don't know what problem you're trying to solve until you start to research what the industry currently does, and is there an opportunity to do something different? And I think those are the best solutions or the best companies who really see that, look at something and reimagine what it could be. But there's a lot more to build because it hasn't really been done before, or you're trying to figure out how to go and kind of build the plane as you fly it. So I think that's amazing that this is your first startup, and that's an idea that's really an incredible innovative idea to think about trying to create. So Y Combinator is great. Building blocks of how to look at trying to put a company together and to build it and to get funding and all those things that they teach you. Um, when you started to put the company together and then you had to go out and build it, did you bootstrap? Did you go out and get funding? Where are you at as a company today?
So we have raised $25 million. Our biggest funder is Andreessen Horowitz, the Bio Fund. And we obviously have YC. We also have Polaris out of Boston that led our last round. And we also have a couple of other amazing funds involved, Lair Hippo in New York, and then Tau Ventures and here in Silicon Valley, and a few others that are just been amazing. And so we did not bootstrap. We had funding, you kind of create it. We had a pre-seed, then seed, then series A, and we're in our journey for our next our next guidepost of
Yeah.
funding.
I always thought that there would be an advantage if you came from the capital markets or you had experience in private equity or at a VC firm before you start a company because you kind of know what you're looking to hear as you invest in startups. Do you feel like that gave you an advantage of when you brought your idea to the table and then went out and presented what you were looking to get in terms of funding to the VC markets?
It's that's actually a great question. I had even helped run very cutting edge IPOs, like multi-billion dollar IPOs, and I was like part of the team, like in the front line of the IPO, like, pitching. Um, and this was a little different actually. So I understood at a big picture. I'd never been in very set categories, right? So I was always in category creation by being in emerging markets and working with developing countries. It was never like I did AT&T, I didn't even know what that is. I was doing like securitizing microfinance, climate 1.0, cutting edge technologies that I would be very creative on the structuring of how to fund them. And I was bold. The difference and why C was very helpful to me here is Silicon Valley has a different language. It's like a different, each place, if you're going to raise money. So one thing is Wall Street, New York City, but Silicon Valley has a different, like, there's just a different way. There are different things that are attractive, and even that's changing. Maybe what was attractive a few years ago isn't the same thing now, right? So you kind of have to immerse yourself in that, whatever is the language of excellence in that place that you're at. So I would say it helped me understand that, but it didn't close the gap of like how you shape a narrative in the most compelling way to speak to the hearts and minds in that realm, which is more like Silicon Valley. So that was a hard, and it's also very interesting because I found it was very, it wasn't like a world you could easily access. It was hard to figure out. YC was very helpful, very helpful. It's almost like a machine of that, to learn how to. We spent an extraordinarily long time on the sentence, few words of what we do. uh, High emphasis on communication, clarity, and then definitely on the short pitch. So YC was very good. Like I was already a mother, first time founder. I had little children. It's at night, in case people don't know that. You know, sometimes I had to bring them. Yeah, I was that one. I was a
Wow.
very different one, but you know what? I loved it. So YC was very helpful in that. But I notice now as we're evolving and and I'll talk maybe in a moment about the humanization of pets, this whole world, which I was part of my system, has become a category itself, a very actually attractive category. Um, so as that's happening and I'm spending a little more time in New York and I'm talking now back a bit more with the folks, my later stage folks, I'm seeing, oh wow, no, I could do an IPO. Like I could take this to NASDAQ. But so I would almost say this mile is becoming easier for me, not harder. So the early one is for me was more challenging.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, I want to talk a little bit about the category you brought up that you kind of helped shape, but let's go a little bit deeper than that. What's the problem that you're solving today with the problem? And what was your thesis that you said, you know what, we can actually build something and we're going to use AI and we're going to solve this problem or help move an industry in a certain direction? Walk us through what that is.
Yeah, so as I was saying, right, initially I was like, wow, there's just got to be better medicines, quite
Yeah.
frankly, for cancer. I mean, I almost just couldn't believe it. So I learned that there was a data gap, a very large biological data gap. You do all these podcasts, Gen AI, for example, many images of, I don't know, an airplane, right, on the internet. When it comes to biology, can be in the biospace, can be climate, the data sets don't exist. They really
Wow.
don't. It's actually very archaic. So there's maybe data lake here, and you think, oh, if you glean it with this other one, no, it doesn't work that way. So if you want to solve very important biological problems, I would argue, and leverage AI, we were lucky to be day one fit for purpose. We structured everything such that we could have voluminous structured data that's well curated. So we already walked in thinking this way, okay? And what was I after? I was after data, biological data that could inform better what medicine works for who, two-legged or four-legged. I was actually testing it on four-legged, okay? And that can have an outsized impact. I'm not looking in anything I do in my life, I'm not looking for incremental, oh, in the world of cancer, live another 30 days. That wasn't my quest. It was like, how can we give a whole second life? Okay,
Mm.
so that's how bold. Um, and we developed FidoCure as a machine of precision medicine, so sophisticated diagnostics and targeted therapies. Okay, and our thinking was, let's put together these biological, like this precision medicine toolbox for the pet side. Okay, we're going to deliver it with the vet alongside the veterinarian at the last mile of care at the clinic. Okay. But we're going to collect the data in a very, very structured way, a way that would almost be impossible in humans. And also because dogs live they don't live longer, excuse me, because they have accelerated lifespan, aging, and cancer is related to aging, we can also see things much faster. And because there's no standard of care, we were able to bring in, and again, all FDA approved for humans, right? So, like, very, very high quality, safety first. But we were able to perhaps go more by the biology and less by in the human space. There's all these guidelines and what insurance will cover. Like, we didn't have to operate under any of that. It could be almost like more truthful biologically. So, with that, we put together this platform. We are at, as you said, over 1,000 vet clinics. We started to collect data very copiously and build this in vivo massive data set. And we leverage AI to figure out the needle in the haystack of like what drug is working better for what tumor, for what, genomic signature, like all sorts of parameters. And frankly, we wouldn't be able to do that if we didn't have such a pristine data set, because AI amplifies the signal. So if you have, if you always had junk in, you have junk out. With AI, it's even worse. So we were very, very deliberate, very conscious. And so we've published in Nature. Our, AI leadership is Stanford Health AI faculty director. On the genomic side, we work with the broad of MIT and Harvard, the number one. So I was also very careful to bring in the absolute best to help us. So anyway, I hope that gave you an idea of the problem we're solving and a little gleaning into the product.
Yeah, no, that's great. Who's the who's the benefactor of what you're creating? Is it pets? Is it going to be humans? Is it the veterinarian that has like now a different thinking about how they can help solve a problem for their clients? Like who is the biggest benefactor of what you're building?
All of the above, and I would add the pet parent also as pets. So what we're demonstrating, and again, we've been publishing prolifically, so we're demonstrating we're improving outcomes, patient outcomes, but not again by a little bit, by like 3x pet patient outcomes. We are validating that what we thought was relevant from the human world of oncology is relevant biologically for pet dogs, and so we're benefiting them. And then what we're learning in pet dogs, we already helped a human drug on the other side of the leash advance. Yes, at Mass General. It's public, so I can say this. It's a ASI, Global Pharma. We partnered. They had a drug for human breast cancer. They wanted to see if it could work in a sarcoma, different type of tumor. Um, Very hard, very expensive to take a drug to the human clinic, to Mass General in this case, and a few other clinics. So we interrogated the drug, we used our data, in pet dogs in the correlate sarcoma. And not only we helped the company make the decision, but we also were predictive. So that's on the human side, and that's one example. What we're doing really in a great way in the sense of as we're learning which drugs are working better for dogs, we are now the category leader and creator in really a portfolio of therapeutics for pet dogs. So all
Wow.
very the risk, high quality, but we're figuring out where specifically, right? Maybe in humans, in they work for one label, like lung cancer, breast cancer. In dogs, the anti-tumor, anti-cancer activity is actually we're seeing it in a slightly different context. But that's really important, and it's really exciting to be doing that and seeing we're giving these pets another chance at life. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, I like what you said about the second life or that second opportunity to maybe continue to live, not 30-day windows, but for long periods if you have cancer, human or pet, in the future.
Yeah.
It's like cancer is the one.
Already present, already happening.
I love that. It's cancer to me has always been the question mark of we've put so much research into drugs and therapeutics, and why is cancer the one that just can't be cured? You look across like all the different types of cancers, and we had calls earlier with Stanford and top scientists and doctors, and some of them are just like, we don't think there will be a cure for cancer. We think there'll be a good way to help extend life, but it's so smart and how it changes and learns and pivots that we don't know. It might not be one drug, maybe it'll be two or three drugs combined. To me it seems like there should be something today, but the fact that you can accelerate not only testing to see what could work on a pet and then utilize that for how it could help humans, I think is amazing. What's the business model?
Well, I'll just address real quick, just something you said, if I may. So, one, what's tough about cancer is it's truly multifactorial. So it's the genetics, it's the environment, the nutrition, the immunology. There's just so many components. It's not like some diseases have like a single gene, and if you can knock that out, like, so it's just a different, it's just it truly, and then as you said very smartly, also changes. It's like smart.
Yeah.
How, having said that, I'll give you something that one of our key founding advisors, Dr. Amy Abernathy, was just, talking about, which is she was a melanoma doc. And in 2005, she had a very poor prognosis for anyone that walked in. By 2015, Jimmy Carter gets on a drug and he's still alive.
Wow. Yeah.
So
That's a long
so
time
so
ago
there are
now.
shifts. They're just in, yeah, right? So there are shifts, really leaps really happening in specific areas. What we want to understand is more broadly. And what you said about combinations is absolutely critical. And that's where, from a human point of view, I think the dogs, like our model around dogs, precisely because we can see things, we can see them faster, we can combine, and because we have the data side. So one of the rate limiting factors has been the paucity of data. You just would be shocked how little is known. Up until a company called Flatiron Health and now Tempus Labs that had a great IPO actually a couple months ago, they're really, the data around oncology was a clinical trial that, oh, maybe would happen at Stanford and UCSF, or Mass General, and somewhere in Memorial Sloan Kettering. So essentially it was very centered around these top clinical research centers, and sometimes just very few of them. So you can imagine how maybe a couple percentage points of patients were really represented. So anyway, so that's something we're fixing, because almost every pet dog is like an N of one clinical trial, like in a good way of interrogating and figuring things out with safety first, in terms of business model, to your point, we one have been generating revenue from delivering and being a co-pilot to the veterinarian, actually at the point
Mm,
of care. So
wow.
creating options. Um, Most vets have not been trained in cancer. So they actually usually prescribe like NSAIDs, steroids. and frankly start talking about euthanasia pretty early on because they were worried about the pets' well-being with cancer and, what will the journey be like if there are no options? No options.
Yeah.
Few, maybe less than 10% can go to a veterinary oncologist or a hospital that's at a university. So what we want to do is democratize the care, and we are doing it. So we started from the data set, we have 2 billion proprietary data points across the cancer journey of dogs. We have one of the largest learning mammalian data sets in the world. And so from that, we started to get IP, and we have a whole regulatory strategy around which therapeutics are actually the most, efficacious, that have the biggest, from our preliminary data, have the biggest impact. And so that's where we're quite focused today. And so really being able to own the space and own it through therapeutics, through our precision medicine platform, and then last but not least, when we do studies that help human drugs, we also generate revenue there.
Wow. I like that. Multiple opportunities to build a great company with revenue channels. How big is the market when it comes to just dogs?
That's a terrific question because what I have seen in a few years has been remarkable. I think, COVID really put this COVID puppy boom on the center stage, but it's actually the humanization of pets is a global secular trend. And you have countries like South Korea having more pet stroller sales than baby stroller sales. You have whole cities, many cities in the United States, like San Francisco, for example, with more pets than babies. So, judgment aside as to what's wrong, what's right, there is an allocation of GDP shifting towards the dog as a true family member. Okay. So, how big is this market? We think is about 50 billion globally. Okay, and we have lots of models that figure this out. And when I say the market size, I mean all the out-of-pocket spend in oncology, in taking care of a dog with cancer. So it could be to clinic, diagnostics, drugs, the whole thing. This could be an underestimation because we use numbers that are published and whatnot, and none of them contemplate, right? These dogs that, came in, let's say COVID, puppy boom, sadly, they will start getting cancer. It's the number one killer. It's 1 out of 2 over 10. So there's probably a boom and there's more diagnosing happening as folks like us come along and have a solution. So we're likely to see the market actually, I anticipate it will really transform.
Yeah. I am not from, but live now in Laguna Beach, and I'm in Silicon Valley monthly as well. Um, every single house on our street has a dog, and Silicon, um, similar to San Francisco, Laguna Beach is on a hill. So there's not a lot of things to do with your dogs except for go to a park, or if you have a backyard, which many don't because it's kind of hillside living, they walk up and down the streets. And you see all day long people walking their dogs. Some on occasion actually have issues. You see them like with bandages on their heads. And I've talked to some of them and they've had cancers, and it impacts that family and the kids, and the whole block knows about it. It's like family members 100%, but it there's not a lot of options when you talk to them. You're like, what are you doing? Well, we're going to have to put the dog down. It's a family member. That's a hard conversation. So to know that there's other options out there that are coming and that technology and studies are helping accelerate those solutions for, I think is amazing. We don't often talk to companies where there's multiple wins in the process. It's not just about saving a dog or having more information that can help a veterinarian or the humans, in our case, ourselves, get better solutions to cure our own diseases, but really having multiple wins in the process of a company, I think, is an incredible mission. As you continue to grow and build your company, what do you see currently as the biggest challenge heading into 2025?
That's a great question. So heading into 2000, I think there is kind of a little bit of an uncertainty, the United States politically, what's going to happen to, so especially on the healthcare side. But I think there's also an enthusiasm happening and a feeling that there'll be a favorable environment for transactions, for M&A. So there's a kind of a positivity. I don't know, each day everybody's going by the day. Um, and so that's kind of been a little bit more positive. I think what, you know, has me thinking today, maybe catching me today, is still the funding environment for early stage. Um, I think that's still, a lot of companies got maybe, overfunded. I don't know, something went really like distraught a few years ago, and the downside has left the world, especially the biotech side, got very, there were there was a lot going on, and so good companies now there's just, I think the VC world is trying to figure out their exit strategy. So there's been a relocation, like, wait, hold on, it's not how I did it before. So I
Hmm.
think, that's something to navigate. And I think a lot of founders, I mean, a lot of founder groups are navigating that. Like how, how do you navigate that and distinguish, right? And in our case, we use AI. We're so lean. We're very, very thoughtful about efficiency, capital efficiency. And that's actually well seen today, that in the past it was just about, spend, spend, spend and hire so many people. And so I actually kind of like the groundedness. But I would say, I think the United States is still the leader really in a lot of this innovation. And so just making sure that the early stage can have, I feel there's much more capital actually in the early stage now than when I started. So I almost feel like where I'm going, it's not private equity exact, like it's, so that's what's on my mind now, just ensuring that there are, good funding vehicles and capital formation opportunities for companies that are thriving and um, that are making an impact also.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, you started this company, it's your first startup. Oftentimes we see breakthroughs in technology for companies that are building tech organizations, but sometimes there's also breakthroughs personally as a leader. So when you started your company and where you're at today, what's a breakthrough that you can share about you personally, how you've led your company, how you've managed the operation? Give us some insights there.
Oh, so I will say some of my personal breakthroughs are tied a bit to the science. I
Mm.
can't help it.
Okay. Yeah.
So we were just, we really single-handedly mapped the canine cancer landscape for dogs. Like, what are the genetic drivers? Like, we just really built something very, like there was a gap of knowledge. So in a few years, we did what 40 years didn't do, So just that feeling, and then publishing with patents, just being part of that. Remember, I don't have that background, so it's been such a stretch and such a leap. So that's been very gratifying. Um, I think personally, really being here, and this is where location a bit does matter, being such at the heart of Silicon Valley and this boom of AI happening, like down my street, folks that, open AI, and all different. So like being very much at the core, the technical core, and understanding things that are very, especially on the biological side, as I was saying, right, which is really building intentional data sets fit for purpose. Um, I'm really proud of that. And as I go talk in London or in Geneva or wherever, like no one can pull, like, I like it when they give me very hard technical questions because I can totally handle them. So that's been kind of gratifying. And then, I also have ideas on team building and, doing very, kind of, I do like the YC thinking. So founder mode, I kind of am a fan. And I think stay lean as you can, but really top folks. So it's like more like elite athletes. And I think the AI enabling tools also help you do that. So I have a team, for example, in Brazil where I'm from, and the English is maybe not the best, but they're really talented. And it doesn't matter. I taught them how to prompt into, ChatGPT, write as if, you're writing to an audience of an IQ to 210. And, like it just, so basically, we're able to do a lot more with a lot less. And I find that fascinating. And I think it's just the beginning.
Yeah. That's incredible. Sometimes it can also come from your upbringing and knowing that you got to figure out an opportunity or a better way in life, and you can't overspend to get there. You got to get scrappy and continue to find a way. So I'm a huge believer as well of staying lean as long as you can. And at some point, there's a balance of you can't overload your people to do more than they can actually do before they burn out. So you're kind of forced to grow. But if you got the funding and you got the momentum, I think that's the time to do it. And I do agree with proximity as being power too, being in Silicon Valley and being near Stanford and being near, really intelligent people. I think just helps you connect with and find, the future of your company too. So I think those are all
As a
really powerful.
non-technical founder, I was able to just walk to my neighbor's house who had one of the first big AI exits and work through my data set. Every Tuesday, I think we had coffee. And then that's how I got kind of a VIP entry into Stanford. It's just amazing. I mean, you just can't replicate that. I know the world, you can do a lot more from many places, but that I could not. It was just so casual and pretty amazing. So I think that's been something very special about being here. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. Tell us a little bit about the organization structure as we kind of wrap up here. As you look into the next year, are you growing? Are you adding people? You can talk about maybe the types of people that you want to look for, attract. Maybe they might hear this and apply or find you. Is there any kind of roles that you're looking at?
Absolutely. We are looking at real world evidence experts. That's a very specific, that those are the people thinking, like building the data sets from everyday clinical care. This is in pets, but could be for, it's usually we have to hire from the human side. So the idea in healthcare is very wasteful, like they don't really like when you go or I go to a wellness visit, like that clinical journey is really valuable, and it's very hard to capture. So capturing everyday clinical care, but in a way that then is very useful for insight. So that kind of talent is like real world evidence experts. I'm definitely after. And in general, I don't think more people solves the problem. I think it's the right people. I know that's like basic what I'm saying, but it really is. And you'd be surprised, and I say this to founders and other companies and group leaders, where you'd be surprised if you have, that's where mission matters. If you have a mission company, we are able to bring in folks, I mean, the very best of the whole world. And that creates a culture of excellence, but of heart also, and creating also, sorry, let me lower this. So back to, so creating a culture of excellence where you also have heart and mind, but also, really create like a higher kind of the next level of, let's say, up leveling. It really is, you know, basically infection. Like it's a positive infection, right? Like it gets everybody a little bit more tuned. And so you don't need that many people, but you need some people around the table that are at kind of the very top, and it spreads.
Yeah, I agree with that. If you've got a great mission, it's easier to tell your story, but also get the right people to the table that might want to contribute, join, be part of it. So that's really great. I love what you're building. I can't wait to hear how it goes. And in the next 6, 12, 18 months, continue to see the progress of what's coming out of this. Um, what's on the agenda on the roadmap as you look at 2025 that you're really excited about?
We are starting our regulatory packages, so interacting with the FDA, the Center for Veterinary Medicine. There is a center. Um, it's very exciting because it's like very official. And so that's going to be a really interesting, and being able to now up level the organization, the data quality, for a regulator. Like I'm really excited. I'm excited to see what happens at the FDA. It's a little bit of a funky moment, but I think it's
Yeah.
exciting. And then certainly, there will be some interesting month. January is always interesting for me because it starts out with JP Morgan, very big event in San Francisco for healthcare. Davos is at the end of the month. There's also a very large pet care conference. So that's what I'm looking forward in January. But then over the year, really building a bridge to the regulator. And hopefully, if we've been creating a data flywheel, I would love to create a flywheel to get more amazing drugs through the regulator to access every dog, every veterinarian.
Yeah. Great way to summarize this up. Well, Christina, I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. Really exciting. If anybody wants to find you or wants to find FidoCure, where do they go?
FidoCure.com. Check us out on LinkedIn. Check me out on LinkedIn, Christina Lopes, FidoCure. I think you can't miss. And we'd be delighted to connect.
I love it. Okay. Well, thank you so much for spending your time here with us today. And to all the listeners for listening, it means a lot to me. You spent your time with us, hearing another great story. I'm your host, Jake Aaron Villarreal, signing off for now, but can't wait to catch up with you all in the next episode. Until then, Christina, the world, take care. If you like what we're doing, don't forget to subscribe. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Follow us on YouTube, where we go behind the scenes to learn what it takes to be a startup founder.